Hello and welcome to the ABC Music Talk podcast, the show for anyone interested in the music industry. This week, my guests will walk us through their journey that saw them produce one of the most succinct Bibles of how to raise money for music projects ever written. We will also hear about their passion for helping others in general through various means, including coaching. But now it's that time again for me to remind you to go road to your videos. Rota is for artists, managers, labels, or anyone in the music industry who needs to create video content for promotion or monetization. Rota makes it fast, easy, and inexpensive to do all of that in one place. Head to www.abcmusic.co and click the Rota logo on the homepage to access a 10% off discount for the service. And a special note this week, as well as recently launching their subscription service, which includes unlimited short-form video downloads for things like socials and Spotify Canvas, they've also launched Smart Tracks, making it easy to create engaging videos based solely on album artwork. So head to the website to find out more. So welcome to the show, Remi Harris. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Alex. It's lovely to be here on your podcast. It's very surreal.
It's been a while, but you have been a constant in my career, and I know you're going to love me saying this, but you are one of the people that I've known for the longest in the music industry. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel pretty old.
pretty old. Well, you know, you made a comment about my grey hair earlier, so that's just getting you back for that. So thanks for that. So we probably will exchange stories as we go through this. You know, our paths have crossed, a few times, and you know, a bunch of the same people. And with all of my guests, they will have to tell me how they got into this crazy business that is called the music industry, because a large part of my audience are people that are just on that journey themselves. And one of the constants from all of the interviews is there is no sort of one path. There's no one way that people do this, and people come into it in lots of different ways. So without further ado, let's hear all about yours. Where did it all begin for you?
So I would say I wasn't a person who was into music any more than the normal teenager. So I was an indie kid when I was about 14. I used to go clubbing. I used to go to garage raves, jungle raves, and I was into music as a punter, I suppose. But I never really thought of working in the music industry until I was in one of my first jobs after uni. I'd done about 10 or 15 jobs before that. My parents sent me to work early. So I had this job working, one of my first jobs after leaving university, in a business that was run by the people that run Hard Rock Cafe and MTV.
Oh, right. Wow.
Which was called Sound Republic. And it was a sort of hard rock cafe for the MTV generation.
Got it.
So that was my first job that had anything to do with music. They used to film the Pepsi chart show there. Yeah. They used to film Total Request Live there. Met Boyzone. Got to meet Will Smith.
Oh, wow.
So that was my
that second one. That second one's very cool. But yeah, the first one, yeah.
It was interesting, and so that was my first job that had anything to do with music. But really, I had no music degree. I came into the industry probably just as those music degrees that started in the 90s were starting to get their first graduates out into the industry. So I never thought of doing that. My brother was a musically talented person and still is, and he's a professional musician. And so I concentrated on the academic side and, never thought that I would end up in music.
Is he an artist in his own right, or is he a session
musician? He's a session musician, producer. He's produced some hits. He's a songwriter. He's been in West End musicals. He's toured with all sorts of people, Vanessa May, Ricky Martin. So he's the complete musician, you could say. And right. I had nothing to do with that growing up.
No sibling rivalry to talk of there.
Well, I just swerved the music. I wasn't as good at it as him, and so I swerved the music because my brother was great at music, and went totally into a different area, and then came back to music in the end.
Yeah, fair enough.
But the the other answer to how did I get into the music industry that I always like to tell people is nepotism.
Beautiful.
Because that is a really strong feature of the music industry, for better or worse.
Yeah, we like to work with people that we know and like, right? That's just how it's always gone.
And I had a family member, my Uncle Keith, who's a manager, a bit of a legend in the game of music management. And so because of him, I was aware that the music industry was a thing, even though I wasn't a musician or doing anything musical. And that's how I came to be told about the job opening at AIM, which was my first serious job in the music industry, really, and the thing that I'm probably best known for.
Yeah, and so AIM these days, of course, is a massive voice on the world stage. Really, I think, that's where you and I met. I wasn't actually working directly for AIM, but I was involved in a part of the development that has sort of become kind of, I guess, like Merlin, right? It was sort of a precursor to that, the work that we were doing there, doing deals with DSPs and offering those deals out as a sort of collectively negotiated, template for the members to sign up to. So it was a slightly different format, but essentially it was the same thing, and I think embodies it's quite a good example of the type of work that AIM has done over the years, whereby they've just used that collective power of the various members that make up that independent music community, whether they're artists or companies, and pulls them together and creates a larger voice. So it was amazing work what yourself and Alison were doing back then. Who else was at AIM in the early days?
So there were four of us. Alison was the first in. She was recruited by the labels to set AIM up, and then she brought on board Helen Smith, who now runs Impala.
Yeah,
who's a fantastic entertainment
Shout
lawyer.
out to Helen Smith.
Shout out to Helen Smith in Brussels. And she had been working at the BPI as a lawyer and came on board at AIM and ran our business affairs. And then there was myself as the office manager with all my admin experience, as I mentioned, from all my 14 jobs that I'd had previously, worked in a bank, worked for British Gas, worked for the restaurant group, worked in an IT company, had tons of different jobs.
That's quite amazing. How old were you when you actually got to AIM?
I was 22 when I got to AIM, but I had had a lot of paid temp work experience. I'd worked everywhere, just everywhere and anywhere that I could get
so did you
holiday job.
Did you go to university?
I went to the University of Leeds, and I did a science degree. So I did a degree in psychology and history and philosophy of science, I think just because it sounded really clever.
It does. It absolutely does. I have no idea what any of those words mean.
Yeah, I was kind of a boffin academic type, which won't surprise people. And I always had jobs from the age of 14, ranging from retail to bar work to office work. And it was really invaluable. So I think that's what it possibly endeared me to Alison. I was a multitasking admin whiz, and I got the office manager job. And then we also had our membership manager, Alex Papasimakopoulou, who went on to found a PR company and be a manager and all sorts of other things as well. And that was our dream team of 4 women that started AIM.
Amazing. That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I think I arrived around 2004, so you'd have been 4 or 5 years in at that point. Yeah. No, I mean, because I remember walking through those doors and having been made very aware of what AIM was, because I'd come from the label side, and it was such a big part of the day-to-day at the label, just in terms of sort of the events that you were running, and obviously the advice and support and opportunities as well. I mean, all of that early digital stuff that I ended up doing, that was how I got into it, because you guys had already kind of kicked it off and and started to give some shape to it. So it was a wonderful part of my career. And I mean, how many years did you stay there for?
I stayed there for 11 years altogether, which is a
lifetime.
long time. It's a long time, and I never intended to stay for that long. I thought I would be there a couple of years and then move on. And because it was a small organisation as well, I didn't see where my career would go from there. It wasn't a company where you could move up, seemingly. But what ended up happening is that AIM's impact and scope grew and grew. And every time I thought, oh, I've done everything now, new opportunities came along to get involved in all sorts of things. We did projects like we obviously were trying to convert the whole of the independent sector into a digital industry. So that was quite a big job. We did we had a music magazine and a music event that we did with the independent newspaper for a bit. So I was involved with that, like just everything and anything to support the independent sector.
Yeah, and eventually you became general manager of what was by that point, not a huge personnel-wise organisation, but certainly impactful. That's interesting, and I think it's quite an important lesson to, for people listening, that whole experience that you went through where you arrived at the office and before we hit record, you were telling us how there wasn't even, pens and paper there. It was really we
had phones, but no. I remember the phone ringing and going to pick up the phone to take a message, and there was no pens and no paper. I was like, oh, I'd better set up an account with the stationery company then. It was literally, started from Alison's kitchen table, started out of meetings with labels getting together and saying, we need to set up our own organisation and we need to address this digital thing back in the late 90s. And you've worked for startups, in your career, and it's really exciting working for a startup, but you do have to put in place those systems and just learn as you go, make it up as you go along. And it's incredibly exciting to be involved in something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually that bit that comes later on where you have to really start to think about structure and organisation and, workflows and whatever else it might be, just to make it all function as it grows. I mean, these are really great lessons. I think I'm involved with a bunch of companies at the moment, and they're all at different stages. Many of them are startups, quote unquote startups. Some of them, of course, now are very established businesses, but they're all at sort of that different, like, growing pains part of how to structure their business, especially when you get into international markets and dealing with people in different time zones and trying to sort of coordinate campaigns, for example, or something like that. It's a really wonderful part of the music industry because I think computers in general and the internet in general have allowed people to start a company, right? That it was much harder when I began, certainly, to do that. And so I think the takeaway from that is you never know where these things are going to go, right?
No, exactly. And I think the best thing about AIM was being in a role where you did have that responsibility and you were given the opportunity to be in meetings and have a say and go away and make things happen. And there was no, it was a great culture at that time, and fantastic community to be part of, really.
Okay, so what happened after that then? So, that was obviously a big part of your career, and actually there was something that you experienced as you were working through that has had an impact on the book that we're going to talk about. The genesis of it sort of came from that, or were you aware of the idea of writing a book at that point?
I wasn't aware when I was at AIM that a lot of the knowledge that I was developing and a lot of the skills I was developing would be so useful to me later on in what's ended up being my self-employed career, running my own business. And one of the things that happened was I mentioned to you day one of AIM, going in and having no infrastructure in the office and just starting something from scratch. And at that time, because I was the office manager and I'd had a holiday job in a bank, I was put in charge of the accounts. So I had to start raising invoices, and I was, calling up people at labels that were the accounts person at labels going, how do you do this and how do you do that? And just learning as I went along and teaching myself and working alongside AIM's auditors and learning that side of the business. Partly because of that, and partly because of me starting to make contact with people at the Arts Council. If anybody phoned up that had any kind of finance question or anything to do with getting funding, they would be put through to me. And I didn't know that much about it. Probably what I knew about it could be written on 2 sides of A4 at that time. And I would
funding people need it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
End quote.
And at that time, really, very few, if any, of the AIM labels were accessing any kind of grant funding or anything like that. It was only really, I suppose, as the pressure in terms of the value that labels were able to get from recorded music started to bite, that people started to look for other avenues to find investment to support their artists. And at that time I started to talk to labels about how they might connect with the Arts Council, how they might apply for funding, all sorts of questions people would phone up with as well. My distributor's gone bust. Unfortunately, that was a frequent call that we got. Or should I spend this money on marketing? Where do I spend my marketing budget? That kind of thing. So really, AIM was really a lifeline and a helpline, as well as a community that labels could call, artists could call with their questions and problems. And we designed all of our training and mentoring schemes and different support programs around the day-to-day needs and responding to and anticipating the day-to-day needs of the labels. So later on, when I left AIM, I was at UK Music, and that's another story how I got there. But I ended up being involved in some campaigning in the last recession, 2008, 10.
So many fond memories, of recession to recession. I know.
Which was the credit crunch recession, it was known as.
Yeah, I remember it, yeah.
So involved in campaigning around access to finance for labels and the wider music industry, and getting really involved in that campaign, which eventually led to the need to write the book, or the drive to write the book about music funding.
Again, I think an important takeaway there for listeners is you never know where these ideas are going to come from. I mean, this is you seeing a need almost unwittingly, and then realizing that actually through some of your other sort of practical experiences that actually there is a real gap here, that this needs to be done. And as I say, it's a fantastic book. It is, I think, accessible to anyone, but doesn't fall short of its goals of informing people on how to approach funding, which is great. What I quite like about it is that the title of it is Easy Money, which I believe is slightly ironic, because one of the points you make quite early on is it's actually not easy to raise money all the time.
Yeah, well, it's easy money ? For that reason. And then it's called, and the subtitle, The Definitive UK Guide to Funding Music Projects. So it's not just covering the release of music, but anything, starting up a promotions business, funding a tour, all the different things that you want to do, funding any kind of music startup is the subject.
And it's got sort of 6 main funding options that you cover: grants, friends and family, crowdfunding, sponsorship, commercial lending. And what I thought was really interesting for me was the fact that very early on you point out that, because I think if you're a recording artist, you think, how am I going to make an album? Or again, I'm talking perhaps in old world when I was a fledgling recording artist, and I would think, well, I'd need a record company to raise the money to pay for the recording, to pay for maybe any videos, photo shoots, press, radio, whatever. And you talk about the fact that a lot of the funding was from sort of other music companies. It was sort of internalized in that way, and we did start to see a bit of a change. And in some ways, I guess the sort of Silicon Valley style opportunities started to sort of filter into the music industry at large. I mean, talk us through some of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I talk about it being a kind of internal funding mechanism where artists would go to labels for advances, and then independent labels certainly would go to distributors for advances, and it would take a very long time to get paid on the other side. So you really, really needed those advances to fund upfront recording costs. And of course, recording costs were higher because we didn't have all the digital means that we do now. So it was a high investment upfront industry, and it was just starting to change when I came into it. And the music industry, the part of the music industry that I was in was commercially successful, and people were able to run businesses even with a lot of trial and error, and perhaps not being very business minded. When they started them, they were able to make money out of them. So I think at that time there wasn't the same call on grant funding and kind of that other type of external funding. And obviously, or maybe not obviously, also it was possible pre-2008, if you had a profit-making record label, to go to your bank and get an overdraft or a loan. And in 2008, all of that tightened up with the credit crunch, and it was very, very difficult, even for businesses that had a really good track record of borrowing and paying money back and had expertise in the industry and had been going for a number of years and had steady cash flow to access any kind of advance money. And that was a real difficult time for anybody looking to invest in new music independently. And that's what the campaigning work was all about. Working with Brian Message on that. He was very passionate about that. Alison Wenham and Fergal Sharkey at UK Music and all of the team were really keen to impress on the government that we need money into the industry. We need to support developing new artists, and that developing new artists is absolutely key to UK exports of music around the world. And so that was the argument that we were making at the time to the DCMS, that we were making to the Treasury, and in fact that other creative industries were making as well. And I felt that, and I think we all felt that we were really being passed from pillar to post, as it were, and not getting the answers that we needed. And for example, I remember a meeting at the Treasury where they were saying, well, why don't these companies just go and get private investment? Because it sounds quite risky, recording and touring and music industry and things like that. Maybe banks are averse to that risk and maybe they can go to investors. And the question that I was asking myself was, which investors, where, who are these people that want to invest in recording, 10 years down the line after, post Napster and post file sharing, and, want to invest in the future of the music industry?
Well, it's easy. You just have hit records, Remi. That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely. But it takes some investment to get there, doesn't it? And
of course it does. Yeah. And of course, the traditional industry, which is the bit that we were talking about before, and how money sort of came about. I mean, the major record companies, of course, have always been able to reinvest because they've had large catalogues that have supported the sort of the risk, or mitigated that risk factor on new artists. But if you're beginning from scratch, as you say, it takes a bit to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you mentioned major labels. That's obviously something that was a huge issue for the AIM labels, that they were trying to do global business from a very small base and make partnerships globally. They didn't have offices in every country around the world. They had to build those partnerships and networks sort of piecemeal. And for them, they didn't have the huge catalogues. A few of them did, but they didn't have the huge catalogues to kind of fall back on that would support them in those lean times. And I would also say it was probably a time when the music industry didn't have the greatest public reputation within the investment community. We both know Eamon Ford and his fantastic
Absolutely.
book about EMI, and
a former guest on this show, I might add. Just
yes,
credentials there.
So his book, which I've got a copy of here, actually, signed copy.
Oh, you got your signed. I just bought mine from Amazon. I'm clearly not that well connected.
And another former person that worked at AIM, actually, before your time.
I remember because Eamon and I worked together afterwards at Fruct. The agency. Yeah.
So his book talking about EMI, obviously that had been all over the financial pages about buyout of EMI by private capital and what had gone wrong there. So I don't think there was a queue of people wanting to invest, certainly in recorded music at that time, maybe in live music, but not in recorded music. And so what I was really interested in, coming back to the ethos of AIM, which is about collectivity and finding collective solutions to things, I was interested in doing the work that the civil servants are almost suggesting that the small label owner or manager or artist should do, which is to go around and find out where is the money and how do I get it. So where is the money and how do I get it? That was the question that the book asked. And I set about trying to talk to people in all of those different areas of funding to find out who they were funding, what percentage of people that were coming through the door were getting money, how much money were they getting, what were the criteria that they were looking at, and maybe to interview some people that had successfully gotten money from these different sources and find out more about the process behind it, so that I could present that to what I imagined in my mind to be the time-pressed manager or indie label boss who could just, in a couple of hours read that information and get the answers that they needed and decide on a strategy for funding their music project. So that's the idea behind the book, is to sort of cut out the legwork for as many people as possible.
Well, and it absolutely does that in a very accessible way. And I'm just curious. So how did you publish it, first of all? How did you go about that?
So I think I had been self-employed for about 6 months at that point and had this idea, and then talked to a few people about the idea. And I had heard that Music Tank, which was a group set up by University of Westminster, were looking to maybe publish a report on something like that. They'd published a series of reports into the music industry in the past, one written by Tony Wadsworth that was very good about the record industry, and another report into digital. So they'd published a kind of series of papers and reports at that time. And I approached them with my ideas on this topic, and they said, yes, we were looking at printing something on this, and your ideas sound great, let's work together. And so they edited and published and retailed the original book in 2013-14. They were a fantastic bunch to work with. I'm still in touch with them now. So
great, that's really nice. So we've got another. You've done a few updates to it, and it's coming out again on the 15th of February. Yeah,
that's right. Well, it's something that's never gone away, really. After I published the book with Music Tank, they organised a conference on music funding. And then I started to get invited around the country to talk about music funding. And from there has grown my business that I run now, doing training and coaching and talking to creatives about all aspects of business.
Yeah.
And Music Tank carried on for a number of years, making the book available. And then they closed down a couple of years ago, and I started to get requests for the book, which I didn't have the rights for at that time. So after the rights reverted to me of the licensing deal that I had with them, I thought I had better make it available again. So it really is the original 2013 book, and some things have gone out of date slightly. Sure. So I have kind of highlighted those in the book with details about what's changed since then. So the names of certain funds and funding schemes and things like that. But the core of it is really about the relationship between funders and the people that receive the funding.
Yeah.
Why do people give you money? Why does an investor invest in you, and what do they expect in return? Why is that grant funder wanting to give you money? What are they doing it for? And what can you learn about the process from that? What can you learn about what's the right area of funding to invest your time in raising from that? Are you a fast-growing startup who's going to, quadruple your turnover in 2 years? Or are you an artist looking to make high concept art that needs a public subsidy? Understanding that, I think, really helps people to kind of grasp what they're doing there in that funding space, and what direction they need to go in.
And it was great to see you tackle that very early on in the book. So I agree with you. I think that's a really important part of it. I mean, I do some M&A stuff, and one of the big questions is, it's not just about the money itself, as in the movement of the cash from one person's bank account to the others. It's like, why? What is, maybe there's a strategic reason why they might be investing, because they have perhaps other business properties that can benefit from what you're doing. And so that sort of contextual stuff is incredibly important. So I'm really, really pleased to, sort of point that out so early. I'm curious. So obviously you wrote that a little while ago. The industry's moved on a bit. And these days, I feel like every time I tune into something like Music Business Worldwide or Music Ally or whatever it might be, CMU, I feel like there's another story about a massive amount of money that has been moved from one person's bank account to another, be it the hypnosis, sort of antics, or, whatever it might be. There just seems to now be this kind of lots of money being moved around, both from sort of within the industry and then from without. How do you feel about how it's sort of gone from when you first started looking at this area?
How do I feel about music funding?
Is there more money available? Is it easier to sort of access funds? Is it something that people are a bit more open to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the situation has certainly picked up from 2010, and money has started to flow around the world and the industry again. I think one of the big changes has been, more and more take up of digital services, and the increase in festivals and live, especially festivals. So those things have helped to progress the industry. But I mean, as we know at the moment with the COVID crisis, there's a lot of turmoil at the moment as to what's going to happen throughout the live industry, from grassroots sector up to the major festivals, and a number of questions starting to be asked about the compensation from streaming services as well. So that story isn't over in terms of the financial aspects of the industry, but certainly after the credit crunch kind of period started to die away, money did start to flow again. But it is a totally changed industry from what it was in 20 years ago when I came into it. Completely changed.
I feel like there's more innovation, and I think that has probably attracted more outside money coming in, and technology, of course, has played a big role in that, whether it's music creation itself, like the nuts and bolts of putting the music together, or the sort of the output stuff, maybe like the video creation platform that is the sponsor of this podcast, Rota, or the DSPs and the sort of the innovation that we're seeing there.
Absolutely. And I think on the sponsorship side, so the brand partnership side, with the rise of the Instagram influencer and the YouTuber as profitable career options, that has completely changed as well. And also the grant funding picture. So in response to the credit crunch and the problems of 10 years ago, funders have really risen to the challenge and started to create new funds. So some of the things that were just newly created funds at the time the original book was published, so the Momentum program that's run by PRS Foundation Arts Council, also the Music Export Growth Scheme, both of those just sneaked into the book as new schemes that had started up at the time, and they've been really important and have delivered a lot of funding and also things like the change of the Musicians Benevolent Fund to Help Musicians UK, and them coming onto the scene with a creative grant fund program. All of that has helped make grant funding a kind of much more significant part of early stage development for artists, which is a really good thing.
And actually, I'm just curious. I mean, it was a big part of last year, 2020. With COVID, we saw trade bodies in particular suddenly become front and center in people's minds, because who else was going to, help organize any government funding that might be made available? And of course, the music industry has a huge, not problem, but a problem in this context of many people are self-employed, and they kind of fell a little bit off the radar, especially in the live industry, which of course was hardest hit. Is that fair? I'm not sure. I think so.
Yes. Yeah. definitely.
And and with the sort of the introduction, I guess, of it being okay to have a job where you just do a bit here and get paid for that, and then do another bit over there and get paid for that, and and it was a bit of a scramble, and without the various trade bodies that cover the different sections of the music industry trying to sort of put that together. I mean, my Twitter feed was full of praise and thank yous to thanks, I was able to pay my rent this month type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a precarious business, and there has been a huge and fantastic response by Musicians Union and Help Musicians and Arts Council and AIM and all of the organisations involved supporting the whole community. But at some point, people need to be able to get out and work again. I mean, there's all these fantastically skilled people who have really valuable skills especially in live, and also what I'm seeing through Young Guns Network. So I run a social enterprise called Young Guns Network.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't quite finish your whole career path, so I apologise. So let's talk very quickly about that, because that was part of your journey.
Okay, backtracking a bit. So I in 2010 I had sort of I'd gone as far as I could at AIM. Again, I was kind of getting a bit restless and asked if I could go on a secondment, find a secondment for myself somewhere in the industry just to get a bit more experience. And I ended up getting a short secondment at UK Music, who then offered me a job as director of operations there. So I said goodbye to AIM and went over to work at UK Music for a couple of years. And I think the main things that I worked on were the campaigning to do with access to finance for the industry and talking to politicians about our industry. And then also a project which I'm really proud of, which was launching an equality and diversity charter, which was worked on by people across the industry and kind of pulling together the first conversation, I would say, across all the trade bodies about equality and diversity, and getting that actually on the agenda of every single organisation, which is the first time that had been done. I think the music industry was a bit late to the game on that.
Well, as I think was really sort of surfaced over, at least the last couple of years, with the sort of the gender imbalance and on the pay scale and all the rest of it. I mean, I think it's been a bit of a wake up call for an industry that. Things like nepotism, Remi, have not helped, but at the same time, it is kind of how it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that 8 years ago when that launched, which was in 2012, I would say at least 50% of the people that I talked to, probably more, thought that there was no problem.
Yeah,
and didn't really want to have the conversation, and that was 8 years ago. So,
I think it was probably the first time they had to think about it, but it hadn't been challenged really before. I don't think, not in a big way anyway.
It had been challenged on an individual level, but not on a systematic level. It had been individual people saying, this is an issue, this is a problem. This has been my experience, but there wasn't a kind of industry-wide conversation about it. Prior to that group of people doing that work and getting it on the agenda, really. So, that was a kind of another major project there. But as I was leaving there, I had a chat with Sam Potts, who had been my intern at AIM. Everything, all roads lead back to AIM, but he was a uni student and came down and did some volunteering at AIM, and ended up being the head of radio at Columbia, and he's now, I think, the VP of promotions at AWOL. So he's moved on since then as well.
That's a good career progression.
Yeah, to a great role. So he had this idea about setting up almost like a kind of an event, a debate, a network for young people in their first 10 years in the industry, and came to me with that idea. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm freelance now, I can do what I like. So we set that up together, and that has been, again, just a fantastic thing to have been involved in for the last few years. So that's my other hat is social enterprise person.
Yeah, very good. I mean, I remember going to one Young Guns network event, and one of the first things that happened was somebody went, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, well, I was just here to support. I was there. Sharon had invited me just to come down and listen, whatever it was. I think Spotify were doing a talk or something like that. And they went, "But you're not a young gun." And I was like, "Hang on a minute. How old are you then?"
All ages can come. No ageism. It's,
there was certainly a moment of I went, "Yeah, I'm probably the oldest person in this room." Damn it.
Sharon Matheson was worked at AIM with me, and then she worked with you at Ingrooves.
That's right.
During the time there.
Yeah. She's still there, in fact.
Yeah.
That's good. Wonderful. Okay, so I understand that you absolutely now love writing funding applications, which is great.
I hate writing funding applications. Do not come to me with your funding applications. The thing is that I wrote this book about music funding, which does cover 6 different types of funding, and the one that people really wanted to know about was grants. How do I get grants? And so I kind of set up a consultancy or an advisory service, I guess, training people in that. How do you do the applications? How do you write the grant applications, giving people help with their applications and giving them a steer in the right direction and things. To write a grant application for somebody else is a particular talent. You really have to get inside their head. It's like being a ghostwriter. You really have to be able to get to know them and kind of write in their voice, as it were. So that is something I can only do for people that I know really, really well.
but you do other things for other people, and the coaching's a big part of it. Yeah, talk us through some of the more up to date stuff that you're doing.
Really based on the experience of being at AIM and supporting a lot of small businesses and independent creatives and artists and things, has led me into this world of being what I started out being really was a business advisor. So I'd had my experience at AIM, I'd worked at UK Music, and I'd done an MBA during that time, and really thought about what kind of support did creative businesses need, and how did they see themselves as artists and businesses. And so I went to work as a business advisor for an organisation called Creative United, and worked then with and trained people in writing business plans, learning about how to understand the financial side of being an artist or running a creative business, giving one-to-one advice to people, and working really interestingly with people from visual arts and theatre and media production and all sorts of other creative industries.
Well, that's interesting, because of course it's quite easy to get a little bit sort of stuck in one sort of particular mode. I mean, AIM was the representative of recorded music companies and members. So the fact that you've managed to sort of like take your experience and give that into other related parts of the industry is great.
Yeah, it's been so interesting seeing actually that there are a huge amount of connections between people in the art world and the music world, and the novel writers and the makers and the fashion brands and things like that. And having done the business studies and had a real interest in just business systems, lean startup, understanding the kind of financial and economic side of things. What I really like to do is try and then translate that into language that makes sense for somebody that's running a more creative business or somebody that's an artist. So there's a huge amount of business information and knowledge out there, but a lot of it is written and presented in a way that makes absolutely no sense for a creative person. So if you just Google business plans, for example, you'll find something that is so complicated that you don't even know where to start as somebody running a new startup, small scale business, or as an artist or something. So it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your business because it doesn't fit into this template for a more conventional industry. what it means is that things need translating. And so in my work now with the coaching and with the business advising and with the training, it's trying to bring together the nitty-gritty kind of business stuff in a really palatable, understandable way so that people can actually use the tools that have been developed within the creative sector, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And I don't know about you, being self-employed and working for different businesses, but for me, I find that as well as the technical side of knowing what to do, there's also usually a personal side and a kind of mindset side to being your own boss, being in creative industries, putting out creative work, running a small business. What you achieve is partly the tools and the knowledge that you have, but it's partly your mindset. And so this is where the coaching comes in, is to have not only the information presented to you, but also the sort of support behind the scenes in being able to take that and run with it and put it into action.
Yeah, no, it's the sort of thing that is never taught at school. You kind of, or at least when you and I were at school, you'd learn about economics, but you wouldn't necessarily learn about how that might be as somebody embarking on a particular career where economics would be part of what your day to day.
Yeah, I mean, and I loved doing those studies, and I loved learning how to read financial statements, for example. But the examples that we looked at in class were Tesco's,
cans of baked beans, yeah,
Microsoft or something like that. And the examples that I bring into the sessions that I do will be Glastonbury Festival. Let's look at their accounts. Let's pick out why they have £10 million in the bank. Well, it's because in case something happens like happened last year. So when I bring those examples into the training, people get it for the first time often, and people that have, these are often people who have been running a business for 10 years. Mm-hmm. They could be a young person, but they could be somebody who's in their 60s that's left their job and they've come into doing their creative business, and they have a vast amount of technical skill in their creative industry, but not necessarily the business experience. So there's a complete kind of range of people, which I really like. So it does take me back to those days at AIM, just chatting to people and kind of having that rapport with people and being able to get them to open up to the things that they feel a little bit less comfortable about and a bit uncertain about, and seeing them kind of transform is just so satisfying.
Brilliant, thank you for that. So you're solo at the moment, and what have you got coming up? What's on the agenda?
Well, I've got the republication of the Easy Money book coming out, and that's going to be available from the 15th of February onwards.
And available on Amazon and that sort of thing?
Available on my website, available on Amazon and Apple and all good bookshops as a paperback. Right, okay. So
so it's more than just a digital version. You're actually okay, fantastic.
Yes, so that'll be the first time that's been available on those platforms and kind of in those formats. I'm hoping that it will just make it accessible to people. I got a DM on Instagram from somebody literally last week saying, "Oh, I've heard about this book that you've written, a book on music funding. Where can I get it from?" And I was like, just wait, it's just coming. I've nearly finished. So that's been interesting, kind of learning about the digital publishing and the kind of self-publishing side of things. And then I'm working on a couple of programs at the moment, a leadership program for women in the music industry.
Fantastic.
Which is running at the moment with an organisation called Brighter Sound.
And you've done some stuff with Brighter Sound before?
Yeah, we did a series of events this summer which were helping people in the music industry to respond to the changing times we find ourselves in with the pandemic. So we did a series looking at changes that were taking place in the media industry, looking at mindset and intuition, looking at the practical help. You talked about the grants and the financial support that's come through this year, and then looking at how do we move forward, and how people in the past in the industry in difficult times moved forward from those challenges. So this is the second kind of piece of work that I've done with them, and working more and more digitally and on Zoom, as we all are at the moment, has brought some really exciting opportunities actually to work with people from across quite a wide geographical area who normally would have to use up an awful lot of their time to be able to come together and work together in a program like that, to be able to involve them, at a much lower cost in terms of the travel and the accommodation and all of that kind of thing has been really exciting. So I'm looking forward to being able to get face to face with people again, but also, enjoying easily being able to kind of provide that kind of support to people. So it's a kind of coaching and training program that I'm running with another coach from the music industry, Tamara Gallon, and we're working together on that, and it's absolutely fantastic. Really enjoying that at the moment.
Wonderful. I'll put links to your website, to Brighter Sounds, in the show notes, so listeners do go and check out these things.
Great. And I mean, if you've got any listeners who are, let's say under 30, which you mentioned that you do have quite a few listeners who are in the early stages of their careers.
Yes, and many that are older. I'm not ageist.
Yeah.
That.
Well, okay, for anybody that would like to, but particularly the under 30s, we have done a lot with Young Guns Network this year to sort of enhance what we're offering. So we're about to start running a project with AWAL, where we're going to be having 5 people that are paid to work remotely and run an artist marketing campaign that is funded by a charity called Youth Music.
Yep.
And we also have a Facebook group which has grown and grown this last year, and a series of events that we're doing over the next few months as well, which are completely free. So we really would love anybody that wants to be part of that community to just come and join in. It's free, and we're there to bring that age group of people together. And again, we've been able to sort of bring in people from there are people from Argentina, Sweden, the US on our session that we had this week. So it's great actually to see that there has been some good has come out of it. Although I do miss our old events, and we've done about 50 or 60 events over the last few years, and I do miss them being in an actual venue where you could chat to people.
Oh, I know. I mean, it isn't the same, but as you say, that what's come out of it is that there are other opportunities. You can, connect to a wider base, because probably for the first time, or certainly in my lifetime and yours, everybody's on the same footing. Everybody's in the same boat, so to speak, and I think it's quite uniting in that sense, as much as there is a distance between us all physically. Well, thank you very much for that. Any closing thoughts, anything like that you want to add?
Closing thoughts. I'm just very happy to be on a podcast. Really, I love.
Oh goodness! Goodness.
I think closing thoughts. I guess my closing thoughts are that, going back to what you were asking in the beginning about getting into the industry and things like that, is that it's been just an amazing journey for the last 20 years, with just so many unexpected, totally left field twists and turns. I definitely didn't expect to be an author. I didn't expect to be on a podcast. I didn't expect to be a personal brand. I didn't expect to be, getting awards for doing a job I love. So it's been an incredible journey, and it's really great to be involved in something like Young Guns Network, to sort of give something back.
It can be an incredibly rewarding industry to be involved with, that's for certain. Yes, yeah. I certainly feel very, very fortunate to have made it my career as well. Very good. Yeah. Okay, well, to my listeners, thank you for listening. Stay in touch with the show via my socials at Alex Branson on both Twitter and Instagram. And also a shout out to the incredible audio assassins who have provided the music branding for the show. Link in the show notes. Remi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on.